You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, it might be a shorter episode. I'm just not feeling it this week. Just the lack of job market is really just, it's really killing me. So it'll be a quick one today, I think. And you guys deserve a more energetic and in-depth show than I think I'm going to be able to provide today. So that's what's on tap, and I'm sorry. But as always, thank you all so much for being here. You do make my life better. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading, commenting, liking, subscribing. Everything you do for the program helps me out immensely in more ways than you could possibly imagine. So thank you for that, and thank you for continuing to support the program. So I'm just going to get underway here, and I'm going to start with BYU. And oh, by the way, the bad mood has nothing to do with the performance of like the Mammoth or the BYU basketball team, anything like that. No, this is actual like real life stuff that's dragging me down and not a result of something I have no control over. Because as I've gotten older, I just want something to talk about is how I view all of this now. It's really tough for me to do that with BYU football because it was so ingrained in my blood for such a long time that I still have an emotional response to them. And I do for the Utah Mammoth as well a little bit. But I just need, the way I look at it all now is, hey, just give me something to talk about and I'm good. And each team really does do that except for the Jazz, but I'm not even going to talk about them this week. So it has more to do with real life consequences and stuff rather than, sport. So I just want to make that clear up front too. So let's dive into it. Let's start with BYU and their rough week. So after winning the Holy War against Utah, going 2-0 in the Holy War for the first time in forever, they had a reward from the Big 12 of, hey, face Arizona and Kansas in the same week. And oh, by the way, we're not giving you any time off between the Holy War and that game against Arizona. Good luck. And BYU pretty much, I don't want to say performed how I expected them to because that's disingenuous of me saying that. But you could see that happening with how the schedule worked out and then how BYU was starting to struggle in games against lesser teams. And now there's kind of a new ceiling because coming into the year, I was a part of the hype machine. I was like, this is an Elite Eight team. This is Final Four material. This team's going to go deep. Now, even if one of the big three is having an off night, it feels like the other two just can't pick it up enough, and there's nobody else on the roster that can spring up and kind of pick up the slack if that one of the big three is having a bad night. So AJ DeBonta had an awful game against Kansas. There's no other way to slice it. There isn't. And that's fine. Everyone's freaking out. Oh, you paid how many millions of dollars for this kid, and now you're sitting sixth in the Big 12, and you were expected to be blah, 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 blah. No, I mean, he himself says, I was never the most athletically gifted. There are other guys in my class, I'm going to say kids, in my class that are more athletically gifted than me. I've had to work for everything I've got. So knowing that, having that as a backdrop, and seeing BYU fall to 5-3, 17-4 on the season, a lot of people are saying it's a collapse. AJ DeBonta is not as good as advertised. Oh, it's all hype. He never should have gone to BYU and all this other stuff. So negativity is really easy in this day and age in the sport media marketplace. I'm going to flip that on its head and just say, hey, how old is the kid again? Remind me. Oh, yeah, he's 18. And you're expecting him to play like he's prime Kevin Durant? I'm sorry, what? So let's kind of take a peek at it that way, shall we? And also take a look at how the roster is constructed. We take a look at this roster. There's three guys. That's it. It's AJ DeBonta, it's Richie Saunders, and it's Rob Wright. That is truly it for this roster. Nobody else averages double digits on this team when it comes to points scored. Kebakita, he averages the most rebounds on the team, but he's one guy. He's the one big on the team that can make a difference. Kennard Davis is supposed to be that outlet. He's supposed to be that three-point sniper for the team. He's shooting 30%. So if one of the big three's having an off night, it's probably going to be a loss against the more elite teams in college basketball, like Arizona, like Kansas, like Texas Tech or Houston. So BYU is probably going to be on that second tier, which before the season started, before A.J. DeBonce's commitment, how ecstatic would you have been knowing this? I think you would have been on cloud nine. Just as a BYU fan, I do. Knowing that you are in the second tier of the Big 12, if not the most difficult basketball conference in the country, the second most difficult. And so I think it's just a reality check that a lot of people need to have. The expectations needed to be that high. You get the number one recruit in the country, go into your team. You get one of the top 10 transfers in the country coming in. You get Richie Saunders back, who is NBA caliber. And you even get Kiba Kita back, who is a volleyball player masquerading as a basketball player. Yeah, the sky should have been the limit. I think the one thing that nobody's really talking about that is a humongous blow to Kevin Young and the way he built this roster is Dawson Baker being out for the year. I think that is a much bigger story than anybody is letting on, because he would have been the leader of the second unit. He was the guy that was going to be able to get a bucket or two while one of the big three or two of the big three rests. With Dawson Baker out, there's not that guy on the roster. There isn't that guy. And in basketball, especially college basketball in today's day and age, you're not going to be able to find multiple of those guys. You're just not. And so Dawson Baker being out, I think, is a humongous blow to this team that nobody's really talking about, because Kennard Davis is supposed to be the fourth option. And then Mihailo Boskovic he's energy personified, but he's out of control. And you can't rely on him. And then the rest of the team, like, where is it going to come from? It's just not. So the sheen on the BYU basketball team is starting to wear off. Looking forward for the rest of their schedule here, they have to travel to Stillwater, Oklahoma, play against the Cowboys, and then they come home against Houston. Like, there's no rest. Like, you're going to keep getting hit. And then there's Baylor. They're going to go to Waco to face off against Baylor. Come home against Colorado for a little bit of a rest game. But then after that, you're immediately going down to Arizona to play against the Wildcats. You have to then face Iowa State at home. And then you get kind of three easier games against Central Florida, West Virginia, Cincinnati. And then you end the season at home against Texas Tech. So the big three need to be on, and they need to be on every night for this team to be able to do what they sought out to do, which was, according to A.J. DeBonce, a Final Four run. For me, I was saying Elite Eight. But honestly, looking at the roster, looking at the construction, looking at how Kevin Young wants his offense to be run and how it's actually being run, his team is the Sweet 16 at best. But there's nothing more that I enjoy than being wrong on this program. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they go to the Final Four. I hope they just explode in March like they did last year. It's just going to be a whole lot more difficult because you have a couple of guys where the motion offense will stall. And that's terrible. For what Kevin Young wants to run, if it stalls onto one guy and it's just a vacuum, you're not going to be able to win that night. So that's how I view the BYU team. It was encouraging to see them battle back in both games. They never lost the fight. They never lost quit. They never lost quit. They never lost just the drive to come back. They believed that they could come back and win in both games, and they almost did in both games. It's just you can't dig a hole as deep as they have against high-quality teams. And they're learning that. Kevin Young is learning that, and his coaching staff. I know they probably already knew it, but now they get firsthand experience with it. So just you take your lumps and you keep moving forward. Positive spin on it. Sky's not falling. BYU is way in a stratosphere that they have never, ever been in the history of their basketball program. And they're taking their lumps. All right, so let's move it on along to Utah State. They are the class of the Mountain West Conference. I told you so. That's another thing I enjoy to say is I told you so. I did tell you so. So this team they beat San Diego State at home in a highly entertaining game, by the way, 71-66. They looked really good doing it. And in this game in particular, it wasn't just MJ Collins. It wasn't just Mason Falslev. Like, It was Carson Templin. It was Adlan El-Amin. Like, these guys were showing up, and they beat the San Diego State team that was the co-favorite before the season started to win the conference. So now for Utah State, their big bugaboos remaining on the schedule are New Mexico. They have to travel to New Mexico to do this one, to play this next one on February 4th. So that's Wednesday. And then other than that, they have a home game against New Mexico to close out the season. They have to travel to San Diego State. They have a revenge game against Grand Canyon on the 28th of February, and a revenge game against UNLV before that New Mexico game. So I still think Utah State is going to win the Mountain West Conference regular season crown. I think they have what it takes to win the tournament after the season. So while the wheels could have fallen off after that new UNLV loss, they have pulled it together. They just demolished Wyoming. They beat San Diego State. And now they have an opportunity to create separation at the top of the conference when they travel to New Mexico this week. So it's very rare for me to sing the praises of Utah State. I know I did that a couple weeks ago and they fell apart. So maybe I'm the curse, but it was like the one good story this past weekend for Utah sports. The Mammoth collapsing against the Carolina Hurricanes, giving up 3 goals in just over a minute and a half. Yeah, that happened. And then coming out flat against the Dallas Stars. I'll get to that here in a second. And then the Jazz being the Jazz. There's nothing to root for there. And BYU kind of figuring out where they fit in the echelon of college basketball. And, well, Utes basketball being Utes basketball. Utah State's the one good story I can talk about, and there you go. So congrats, Aggies. You are now the favorites and remain the favorites to win the Mountain West Conference. It's pretty awesome. All right, so let's move it on to the Utah Jazz. Psych. I'm not going to talk about them. Let's move it to the Utah Mammoth now. So the Mammoth, if you listen to my program over on YouTube, Utah Mammoth Daily, via Fan Arch, you'll hear me talk about them every day and different stories that pop up. So if you want more in-depth coverage of the Utah Mammoth, head over there and listen to that. But as far as this program, if I go by the week-to-week sort of viewpoint, this team is too hot and cold to be able to predict accurately. They win the hard games. They play against the best teams in the league, tooth and nail. They never let a team separate. They always battle back. So they beat teams like the Panthers. Yes, I know the Panthers are outside of the playoffs right now, but they are still the back-to-back defending Stanley Cup champs. They beat the Dallas Stars at home last week, or a couple weeks ago now. They beat a Seattle Kraken team 6-3, and by the way, the Seattle Kraken are on a heater. So they do that, and then they blow a lead against Carolina that they had no business blowing. 3 goals in just under 2 minutes is insanity. And they lose a game against Dallas where you don't go on the penalty kill, you win the game. And the penalties that they committed were ones you can't avoid. Don't shoot the puck into the crowd over the glass. Pretty easy for an NHLer. For me, impossible. Don't play a puck with a broken stick. As soon as the stick breaks, you drop it. That's pretty easy too, especially for a guy who has so many NHL games like Nate Schmidt. So boneheaded penalties need to not happen. A high stick against Carolina. I made a post about this on the Facebook page. I was heated after the game. I did make that post. I have since had clarity. And it wasn't all on Barrett Hayton, but you don't make that penalty, the momentum doesn't shift, you win the game. It's pretty simple. You can connect the dots really easy there. So the special teams has collapsed in on itself like a dying star. The power play is now sub 15% success rate. That is good for dead last in the league. Interestingly enough, by the way, at 31, it's the best team in the league. It's the Colorado Avalanche. They have just above 15%. I think they're 15.1. That's weird. And it's kind of showing its ugly head a little bit for Colorado because they have lost a few games here. but they were never going to keep up the pace they were on. But anyway, I digress. This team needs change. And I believe the change that's going to happen here, if I were to look into my crystal ball, that's about as clear as mud, I would say that the change that's going to happen is Logan Cooley coming back, Alexander Kerfoot coming back, and that's going to be the change. Would I like to see a trade? Absolutely. They have a game against Vancouver Monday, and if I were Bill Armstrong, I would not let Elias Pettersson get back on the plane after the game. I would ship off Barrett Hayton, a bundle of picks, and a prospect or two to get Elias Pettersson on the team. And I think that would solve a lot of the problems the Mammoth have. And he fits the timeline. Everything that I hear, everything that I read about the Utah Mammoth front office, about how they're building out this roster, they're not going to go for a rental. Smart. I get that. They're not going to go after Artemi Panarin. They're not going to go after one of those guys on the market that is a short-term rental. Smart. There's a guy in Vancouver that fits everything the Mammoth want to do. He fits to a T. And he's in a premium position. It also takes weight off of him, the player. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. It takes the weight off of Elias Pettersson to be the alpha, to be the guy, because the Mammoth have multiple of that player. And he doesn't even have to be on the first unit. Logan Cooley will probably be on the first unit. So, it fits too perfectly to not pull the trigger on a deal like that. So I would say to Bill Armstrong, and I know you're listening, Bill. Everybody does, from Kalani Sitake to Kyle Whitney. Everybody listens to this program. I hope the sarcasm was coming through there. I really hope you caught that. But make the trade. It fits. It fits your timeline. He's under contract for a long time. Make the trade. Make it happen. Make it happen, Captain. But other than that, I think the rest of the team is doing just fine. Clayton Keller has kind of hit a cold streak a little bit here. That's to be expected. I think he's pulling up a little bit just so that he doesn't get injured before the Olympics. After the Olympics, I think he's going to be playing like a man possessed. I think he's going to play with his hair on fire. And he's going to do everything in his power to get this team into the playoffs. I fully expect that to happen. I think Dylan Guenther, this break is going to be great for him because he's going to be able to get healthy along with the rest of the NHL. Like, this isn't going to be in a vacuum. But the majority of the Utah Mammoth squad is going to get healthy. I think Alexander Kerfoot will be coming back a week or two after the Olympic break ends. And so that's another, post-trade deadline addition the team will have. And so if they make a deal for Elias Pettersson, just imagine that. Oh my goodness, this team would be awesome. All you have to do is give up a couple of guys who don't fit long-term, couple of draft picks that you are well stocked on, and maybe a prospect, and you have your center. And he gets a restart in a fresh market, and he's not going to be counted on to be the guy because he's not going to have to play up to a contract that, quite frankly, the Canucks overpaid on. So it fits too well to not make it happen. But everything coming out of the Utah Mammoth front office is that they're not going to make a deal. You don't make those kinds of deals in the middle of the season. Well, you do, Bill. You do if you want to make the Stanley Cup, and you definitely do, or the Stanley Cup playoffs, excuse me. And you definitely do if you want to win a Stanley Cup. So make the deal. All right, that's the show this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.